Hello, everyone, and I want to thank you for joining today's session. Today, we're going to unpack one of the toughest operational challenges for IT and security leaders, orchestrating identity and access management across teams, systems, and environments. I'm Brad Rump, Field CTO here at Tynes, an intelligent workflow automation and orchestration platform that powers the world's most important workflows. I'm joined by my co-host, Swara Gandhi, Senior Solutions Architect for IAM at Amazon Web Services. I'm going to turn it over to Swar to give a quick introduction.
Um, Thank you, Brad. And hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in. My name is Swara, and over the last 4 years, I have worked with some of the largest financial services customers on their most complex AWS identity challenges. Now, if you have used AWS, then you have used AWS IAM, the service that securely controls access to all of your AWS resources. And today, I will be sharing some of the first hand stories and lessons learned from the field to help guide your identity related decisions, along with Brad. Let's get started, Brad.
Yeah, awesome. And thanks, Swara. So here's what we're going to cover today. First, we're going to look at identity in the real world and why IAM often lives and faces the most complexity in operations. Second, we're going to explore how identity gets fragmented by design across teams and systems. Third, we're going to discuss how to adapt IAM for organizational growth and a hybrid reality. And fourth, we're going to talk about the strategic role of IT operations in identity orchestration. And finally, we're going to walk through the practical steps leaders can take to modernize identity workflows. So we're going to start with some common IAM challenges and where they matter most in operations. So in most organizations, security teams are responsible for the what, and they define the policies and guardrails. IT and operations teams are responsible for the how, and they execute the workflows that carry out the day-to-day processes. So this often leads to miscommunication, and often steps can be missed. So the challenge that identity touches too many systems to be managed in isolation. It cuts across the entire enterprise, things like HR systems, Active Directories, cloud IAM platforms, SaaS applications, and even custom-built tools. And don't forget about the role of identity across deployment types, cloud, on-prem, and hybrid. So without orchestration, the result is predictable. We end up with endless ticket loops for simple access requests. We see over-provisioning oftentimes just to avoid blocking productivity. And we also see missed revocations when employees leave. We see this all the time, movers, leavers, and even joiners where this happens. So we see failed audits, and that undermines both trust and security. And Swara, I'm really curious kind of what your thoughts are here.
Yeah, I completely agree. I see this play out with customers every day. Most often, ownership is really not the problem. The problem is fragmentation. Each team manages a piece of the puzzle, but no one has a full picture of how identity has been set up. For example, recently I was working with a customer where the HR department actually manages the identities for their workforce, while they had an engineering team that independently controlled access to the cloud applications. So you can see that there are two different teams managing two different workflows. And that's where risk really creeps in, and the organizations lose both the agility and control, as the central security team might lack the visibility and has no unified way to deprovision a layer of engineer, as you were talking about. So, why does this happen, right? It's because identity and access management is often siloed by design. And to effectively manage and break these silos that we see day to day, we first need to identify them. From our experience, what I have seen is there are three main common types seen. The first type is functional silo. Now, this is similar to what we discussed, where the company's HR, engineering, and security teams all handle aspects of employees' access. However, the second type of silo that we see is a system silo. Say you have a company A that is acquiring a company B. Company A might be using Okta for its cloud applications. And company B relies on on-premises Active Directory or any legacy applications. So you see there is a clear distinction between the applications being used by both of these companies. And the third type is the ownership silo. In this case, policies may be centralized but are enforced in a decentralized manner. Now, the biggest risk comes from the ownership silo out of the three that we discussed, as there is no single entity that has full picture of the access permissions. And this decentralization leads to dangerous blind spots, as it is really difficult to spot and remove orphan long term credentials, like Brad mentioned, or account access after a vendor engagement has ended, or to identify any over permissioned accounts. What's your perspective, Brad? Do you see this too?
Yeah, the irony is that silos make identity and access management harder for everyone. And security teams are stuck simply with more audit noise. IT teams are often trapped in, I mentioned, kind of endless ticket queues, and end users can experience, inconsistent access and unnecessary friction. And the business as a whole just simply slows down. So, what we believe is that good orchestration can eliminate those hidden handoffs and creates a single fabric from policy to the action that needs to be taken. And, we really can't address silos without addressing some other pitfalls that teams experience with legacy IAM processes. Swara, what have you seen teams struggle with most often?
So what we have seen is IAM failures tend to crop out in three main spots. First off, it's really common to find orphaned long-term credentials just hanging around, especially in large companies, right, where central security teams can't get a full picture. They simply don't know how to spot unused credentials. I was recently working with a customer who found thousands of unused IAM users just lurking in their 100 account environment. They have this big AWS organization with hundreds of accounts, and those accounts can have hundreds of IAM users.
Mm-hmm.
But we were able to help them find those by running AWS IAM Access Analyzer scan. So that's very common. The second one is cross account access that accumulates over time. So we see customers when they're vetting different SaaS providers or vendors, and they grant those vendors permissions to certain roles in their AWS environment. However, over time, uh, as you have vetted, you might go with one partner as compared to the others that you were vetting, but you forgot to just remove their access from your environment. And then the third is teams end up with way more permissions than they need. And I think this is very, very common because the security team builds policies keeping in mind the potential needs of the developers, right? If they don't want to be a bottleneck.
Yeah.
Uh, so they design these permissions for their developers, but the developers might end up with more permissions than they need. So organizations often get stuck during modernization when they're trying to retire legacy IAM users or keys or long term credentials, but just do not know which workloads still depend on them, right? They don't have that unified view. And it takes time to discover usage, especially in dynamic environments. And which means resistance is really common because governance feels more like cost center and success is really hard to quantify, right?
Yeah.
So then there are reorganizations and mergers and acquisitions that you also need to account for when you have such dynamic environments, when you're acquiring new companies, or even as you go through separation, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think you've given some great context and some really good examples. And I actually think that's kind of a great segue into our next topic, which is, structuring your approach to IAM and adaptability. The reality is that identity systems, they don't stand still. Organizations are constantly restructuring and adopting new tools, and expanding into hybrid or even multi-cloud environments. IAM has to flex and keep really, try to keep pace with that change. So a cloud first mindset does not mean cloud only. It means being orchestration ready. And it means designing workflows that can span both cloud and on-premise environments without requiring you to rebuild everything from scratch. Swara, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where technologies like infrastructure as code and single sign on or automation provided by Tynes can really be helpful, right? Uh,
100%.
it can act as foundation for flexibility because it can help centralize some of the controls and management. You can also enable version control and enable automated validation.
Mm-hmm.
Many customers often reach out to me struggling during acquisitions, mergers, or divestitures as they have inconsistent or manual infrastructure management, and that slows down the integration and separation efforts. Um, and this is where, as I was saying, infrastructure as code (ISC) becomes critical, and to ensure that consistency, speed, and repeatability. Um, by applying policy as code, right, in IAM context, and by applying these strong guardrails, you can restructure without writing your identity from ground up. Um, as Brad was saying, right, even for the multi-cloud or hybrid environments, customers today use Terraform modules. I see it very oftenly used. And other infrastructure as code templates across providers to standardize their environments. Um, for provisioning and deprovisioning into SaaS and directories, I really see customers adopting standards like SCIM that helps them maintain consistent user lifecycle management. Um, if they're using multiple identity providers like Okta, Ping Identity, Azure AD, and many more now in the market. All of these approaches allow organizations to keep management centralized, track who is making changes, and ensure policies are version controlled, and you enforce continuous assurance. Um, is that your experience as well with IT teams, Brad?
Yeah, the truth is, IT operations teams they're the ones that are closest to the workflows, and they live in, systems every day. And that's why orchestration really belongs here. I think you gave, some great, another great example, infrastructure as code, and that's something that, we have ongoing conversations with and that are helping our customers with leveraging kind of the automation and orchestration, capabilities within our platform, to help them, spin up and spin down, the requisite infrastructure. And so, we have a lot of customers that are using, different products from HashiCorp and, leveraging Terraform, and then leveraging Tynes kind of as the orchestration engine, stitching a lot of these different systems together. So identity orchestration, really bridges the gap and, between policy and execution. And when it's done well, it reduces the silos while still maintaining a strong production posture. And that means eliminating the handoffs between IT, security, and HR. It means standardizing lifecycle events like onboarding, role changes, and even offboarding. We're working with a lot of customers that are solving those use cases. I touched on the joiners, movers, leavers, and we're really helping automate and keeping those processes, making them much more efficient and giving the control that's needed to provision and deprovision users across different systems. So. And this is where, again, automation and orchestration really shine. And with tools like Tynes, we can connect IAM events from end to end, so cover the full spectrum. I'll give another example, like when HR logs a new hire, system automatically provisions the right access and creates an audit log. And when a role change is maybe recorded in that same HR system, permissions are updated across AWS, SaaS applications, on-prem systems, and even the security team is notified. And when a departure is logged in HR, all those credentials get revoked instantly, and that immediately eliminates the risk of things like orphaned accounts. So by securely orchestrating and automating these processes from end to end, we can minimize the end user friction while also enabling the IT organization to be much more agile and productive. And last, let's not forget about the opportunity for end users themselves to self-serve. Things like submitting a request via a chatbot or a copilot, and submitting a form via Tines Pages, which is really kind of a lightweight, form capability and feature that we have within the platform that makes it very, very easy to create user interfaces that end users can engage with. And really, we do that with Tines Pages wherever it really makes the most sense for them and where you need a human in the loop. So these requests can be easily and quickly fulfilled in the manner that works best for both IT and security teams. And through deterministic workflows, agentic, or even human in the loop, again, we cover the full spectrum. So with that, Swara, what are your thoughts on this?
I think you hit the nail on top, right? Like, that's exactly, you must think about self-service. In my experience, companies often define organization level security controls and then they delegate application permissions management to the developers.
Yeah.
Because your developers are actually building your apps and they don't want to reach out to central security team every now and then, right? So we see developers are allowed to write their own permissions by using a provided template or pre-approved configuration. We were just talking about infrastructure as code, right?
Yep.
Predefined templates are one of them. So that the central security team doesn't become a bottleneck. And keep in mind, to ensure automation aligns with your security policy, your validation really needs to live in your pipelines. Um, Even if an automated process proposes a change, right, or a developer proposes a change, the
Mhm.
CI/CD system should verify the change against the policy before it is even being applied.
Right.
Now, more importantly, when you introduce AI, right, treat your agents as identities as well. Treat them with explicit roles and permissions and monitor their actions and review those permissions frequently as you would do for any other IAM principle in your environment. Um, what I recommend is having a human in loop review points, especially as you introduce AI, right? So that you have that one approval point before things get deployed. And then have auditable decision logs and guardrails that prevent the privilege escalation and keep your operations agile without you sacrificing the control. Right, Brad?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I was actually at Okta's Octane a couple weeks ago, gave a lightning talk on kind of AI and orchestration, automation, and you couldn't go by a single booth without a vendor touting their AI or their agentic capabilities. And then one of the hot topics, of course, was treating these agents and giving them an identity just like you give an end user. And I think that's something that we're gonna see. It's a very common theme, and we're going to see a lot of different vendors really focusing on how they can secure agents in exactly that manner. So I kind of look at it, the result is more control, not less. And IT leaders, they don't want to own all of the identity, but they do want visibility and guardrails. And they want fewer tickets and less back and forth. And this type of orchestration can really deliver that kind of balance.
Completely agree.
So how do you actually get started modernizing identity? A good approach is really to start with 5 key steps. So we're going to do a little back and forth here, I think. And the first step is to identify and map your sources of truth and access requirements. Really understand the user journeys and the most common access needs across the organization. Swara, I'd really be interested in your thoughts here.
Yeah, so my team currently works on data parameters. It's a way of enforcing some of the preventive controls for your AWS environment.
Yep.
And the very first step that we recommend our customers is to map their security control objectives to the design guardrails. You first need to know what kind of security objectives you have, right? Only then you can design guardrails around them.
Yep.
And this will really help you define what must never be allowed, right? Whether intentionally or accidental. And then you can prepare for impact of violations as well. But
Yep.
first, you need to know what your objectives are.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. And I'd say the second step is to structure, design role-based access controls and models to establish governance policies and define exception processes too. Create templates for common access patterns so that they can be applied consistently.
Yeah, and remember the path to self-service that we discussed, right? Um,
Yep.
it should be defined at this stage as well. You can create account models and automated account lifecycle processes that enable delivery transparency for you. You have accountability embedded within, and then the ownership is really the important part, right? Um, with this, you can really empower your teams to request and manage access without you being the bottleneck as a central security team.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that the third step is to implement, right? Connect your identity providers and target systems and start building automated workflows for provisioning and deprovisioning. And you can, again, touching on self-service capabilities, very important that you establish those for common requests. And that's really to help your IT teams not get bogged down in endless, ticket loops.
Yeah, and when you are implementing, right, productize your governance at scale. Treat governance like a product. We just talked about automation and CI/CD pipelines and infrastructure.
Yeah.
Um, you can apply the same rigor of automation versioning, releases, and testing to governance, right? And this will ensure that governance keeps pace with the growth of the business areas while it is still being prioritized in your environment.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. And so the fourth step is to monitor, track volumes of access requests, resolution times, and audit trails. And you can implement continuous monitoring of service levels so that you can see whether identity processes are keeping up with demand.
Yeah, and we were just talking about this, right? Like central security teams missing that unified view of what is happening in the environment. And a critical piece of this step is to really equip with centralized monitoring and preventive feedback loops. Um, you can provide shared tools for visibility into activity and build runbooks that enable your teams to respond consistently and have a place to go when they run into issues, right? You can use those monitoring insights to drive continuous improvement and prevention rather than having reactive fixes in place.
Yeah, totally, totally. And I'd say finally the fifth step is to iterate, refine your access models based on usage patterns that you're seeing, enhance your workflows with additional automation, and expand coverage to additional systems and access types. All right, we're gonna come down the home stretch, so bring it home, Sora.
Yeah, just to add to what you said, right? The fifth step at AWS, we say that when you are trying to achieve least privilege in terms of permissions, it's always a journey. It's not one and done. You have to reiterate over permissions as your needs change in your dynamic environment.
Yeah.
Uh, and don't forget, when you are introducing automation or AI into identity, start small and then scale. When you're using AI, use AI for lower risk areas like ticket triage. Brad, you were just talking about the long feedback loops, right, with ticketing.
Yep.
You can use AI for that. You can use AI for summarization or recommending access changes, but always keep a human in loop for approval, especially for identity needs. And treat AI agents as identities with defined roles and permissions, just like you will do for your human users. And that way, you get efficiency without giving up security, no matter if it is a human user or AI. Now, that was a lot, but a structured approach will always help you define processes and map tools to your requirements.
Yeah,
Right?
I agree. So to wrap it up, identity and access management is no longer just a security problem or an IT problem. It's really a business critical capability that requires orchestration across both teams and systems. Identity is everyone's responsibility, but it lacks accountability when workflows are fragmented. And with the right workflows in place, IT leaders can reduce friction for users. They can close security and compliance gaps and adapt identity to organizational change and maintain a strong production posture. So tools like Tines make this practical by enabling intelligent orchestration and automation across your entire stack. And we give you complete control over where your AI agents are inserted into your workflows. I like to call our AI agents a first-class citizen within the platform, like some of the other actions that power our Tines stories. And last, let's not forget that you got to provide human in the loop oversight where it's appropriate. And again, we can accomplish this within the platform with our pages capabilities, and we also have very robust case management capabilities as well. So
Yeah, and more importantly, right, if you embed automation, then you will no longer be constantly pinged uh, as central security team. You'll not become the bottleneck for the teams, and you can actually focus on the security requirements for your environment. So define clear ownership for central controls, delegate permissions management to the applications, to the developers, right? But doing so using boundary policies for them or predefined templates.
yep.
Um, embed validation and compliance checks in your CI/CD pipeline. Um, and while you're structuring your organization and security needs, even if it takes time, um, it's okay to invest time right now because this will really help you in future as you scale, and especially if you go through mergers, acquisitions, or divestitures.
Yeah, and I'd say ultimately, what this means is that identity orchestration can ensure efficiency, security, and scalable governance while keeping both IT and security teams, unblocked and a lot more productive. So I know we've covered a ton, identity as a security signal, automating for scale, and unifying IT and security. I'm going to open it up to the audience for questions, and I see that we have had some questions come rolling in, and so yeah, super. Let's jump right into some of these. So let's see. First question: for organizations just starting to modernize IAM, what's the first quick win they should go after? Swara, do you want to take a swing at that?
Yeah. Um, okay, so there are three solid quick wins for organizations that are starting to modernize IAM on AWS, right? That at least I recommend based on my experience. The first one is this was actually a new feature that was released last year. It's called centralized root user management with AWS organizations. Um, before this, what happened is if you have AWS organization and you have number of member accounts in them,
Mm-hmm.
there was a root user created for each of those accounts. And the root user is actually Guards mode. It has administrator access, it has access to the billing, it has access to any changes that you want to make to that particular account. So it was a task for the central security team to manage all these root users, especially if you have hundreds of AWS accounts. But with this centralized root user management feature, now at the organization level, you have a way to create a scoped root user credentials for any account in your organization. So let's say that there are certain actions that could only be performed, right, by the root user of a member account. Essentially, you have disabled root user for all the accounts, but if at all you need it, you can create a scoped root user credentials and then use it for that particular account. So that's number one. Number two is try to deny creation of IAM users because they have long-term credentials attached to them, and you do not want those credentials to be long term, right? We are all moving towards short term credentials. So use service control policies or an equivalent if you're using Azure or any other cloud providers to deny creation of long term credentials. And number three is enable IAM access analyzer in AWS. As I was talking about, the central security teams really lacking that unified view of what's going on in your environment in terms of identity. IAM Access Analyzer will give you that central view of all the IAM users, principles that are not being used for a period of time, any permissions that were given to a particular user, but they have not used those permissions, let's say in last 90 days. So I think these are the top three, top of my mind.
Got it. Got it. All right. Another question. I think that was a very thorough answer. So next question is, how should teams think about layering automation over legacy IAM systems they can't yet replace? I can go ahead and take a swing at that one, Swara, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I'd say is, start small and identify, high value use case to automate first. And that could be something such as automating user access key rotation or even enforcing MFA. Another point is really kind of planning for the long term. And, while we are always looking to layer in automation, and that can be a very, strong short-term solution, you should always work towards a longer term kind of modernization roadmap. And I'd say that that roadmap should encompass and incorporate and highly leverage automation and orchestration. But you should really be looking at how can you fully replace those legacy systems. And that's where again, where Tines can really help. Where we're taking one system and taking, either users or kind of RBAC controls and moving those over to a new system, leveraging, our integration and automation orchestration capabilities. And, last, I'd say kind of monitor and audit. Automation really doesn't remove the need for monitoring. You can use things like AWS CloudTrail to log all your IAM actions, and you could integrate, with Amazon CloudWatch to create alerts for suspicious activity. And then, of course, you can use Tines to integrate, with any other systems that you need as well. So, all right, let's see. Next question is, what metrics or KPIs do you find most useful when evaluating the effectiveness of an IAM program? Swara, I'm going to let you handle that one.
I think that's really important, right? We just talked about all the different processes and how can you make your identity management better. But unless you can quantify it, it will always be difficult to reason about it to your leadership, right? So I think one thing that you can do from AWS perspective is use IAM Access Analyzer. I cannot reinforce this enough. So it will really give you you will see a number of findings created as soon as you enable the access analyzer, as I was saying, for unused access or external access or cross account access, or over permissions. And then let's say that you enable the scan and you see 1,000 findings. I hope you don't see 1,000 findings, but if you see 1,000 findings, as you go ahead and mitigate those or remove those unused access, then it will be really easy for you to show to leadership that we resolve these many public or unused access findings. So that's one. The other that comes to my mind is orphaned accounts identified. Okay. So as I was talking about, and actually, Brad, I think you focused on this, where you have employees joining, right, or moving teams inside your organization or leaving the organization. And for a company, if you're creating an individual AWS account for those employees, then you really need to make sure that you remove those accounts, because otherwise you'll be paying for the resources that are running in that account, number one. And then you can never be sure what kind of access has been given to certain principals in that account. I think a strong KPI can also track how quickly these accounts are identified and disabled.
Yeah.
Brad, you talked about having automation at times, right? Where you can automate how the movers, levers, joiners can be onboarded. So I think that kind of automation can really help over here.
Yeah, and I just saw a question roll in from Prashant, and he asks like, "Hey, if an organization is merging with another, how can the product help, or kind of maybe what are some of the benefits?" And I think we've just touched on several of those, but within Tines, we have an incredibly robust story library. And a story for us is a workflow that we've already automated, or maybe one of our customers has automated, and then we've curated it and added to our story library. And then we have numerous partners that are building out and automating different processes, workflows, which we call stories within Tines as well. So I think one of the benefits of the platform is to first look in the story library and see if a story exists. Maybe it has the different IAM systems from each one of the companies that are merging. And maybe we've already automated and taken care of what we call the muck work of kind of all the repetitive tasks that need to happen, and how we could move data from one IAM system to another. We also have incredibly rich integration capabilities within the platform. We call those templates. And so we have literally upwards of over 500 templates and different systems that we integrate with, and we're adding to that our template library every day. And we make it very easy for our customers. One of the benefits is if we don't have a system, but as long as that system has an API, and that API maybe has examples that provide like curl requests, you can simply copy and paste the curl request into a Tines story, and it'll automatically kind of generate those requests and build out those integrations on your behalf. So that's a feature that a lot of our customers love, and it makes it very easy for us, again, to continue to add to the integrations that we have and support within the platform. But again, we give our customers full control over building out those templates and integrations as well. One last question that I see here is, where do you see IAM heading in the next 1 to 2 years, especially with hybrid environments and AI? Swara, do you want to take that, and I can embellish?
Yeah. Yes, I think AI questions are everywhere, right? Yeah, so the way I foresee it is enhanced security with AI and predictive analysis. So one of the things that I already start customers implementing is AI-driven anomaly detection. I see the use of AI and machine learning in IAM systems to establish behavioral baselines for users and non-human identities. Um, what I see is the AI really being used for real-time detection of unusual activity, like a developer accessing a production database at an unusual time, for example.
Mhm.
Um, and then you trigger automated remediation, or just could be a simple email to their manager, right? Um, yeah, I think that's one. Do you agree, Brad?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think something else that I can also kind of foresee is just improved and least privileged enforcement, and really kind of looking at using AI to help automating enforcement of kind of the principle of least privilege. And by analyzing kind of different user activities, you can identify and recommend removal or of overly permissive or unused entitlements, which can drastically reduce the attack surface at scale. I think some other areas, Swara, I know you and I had touched on like a unified identity fabric. Do you want to just expound upon that a little bit?
Yeah, I think for the customers, right, like the proliferation of hybrid and multi-cloud environments means that as an organization, you'll need a unified way to manage your identities and access controls across different cloud providers, probably AWS, Azure, etc., and even on-premises systems. So, centralized IAM platforms such as AWS Identity Center and identity orchestration solutions will help unify those access controls and governance under a single framework. Uh,
Yeah.
Wanted to add one thing there, that for Prashant's question, for mergers and acquisitions, I do see AI being used over there as well. I see customers running scans in their current organization to see what organization level dependencies are there, what service control policies are implemented, what network dependencies are there.
Yeah.
Get an overview of how a particular organization has been structured before they go with mergers or bring in an account from outside.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, you know, lastly, I touched on this earlier, just based on my observations at, the conference that I was at Okta's Octane a couple weeks ago, but just, can't stress enough how important that non-human identity management is and will continue to be in the foreseeable future. With AI and the growth in AI and also with, the growth in automated systems. That means that there's a lot of non-human identities floating around out there, and these could be anything from AI agents or even APIs. And those are really a primary focus. And so IAM is going to continue to evolve to protect and govern these different machine identities with the same rigor as human identities, including monitoring their behavior for anomalies. So definitely something everybody should be very well aware of in terms of how different systems and IAM systems are managing these kind of non-human identities for any kind of agentic behavior. So, well, I think that wraps up all of the questions. So I want to thank everyone again that joined the session today. And whether you're just listening in or popped in a question for us, and I want to thank Swara. Swara, it's been awesome working with you from AWS and just all the experience that you've brought to the table, and added to this great conversation. If you want to catch up on anything that you might have missed, we're going to be sending out a recording tomorrow. And so keep an eye on your inbox. And you can also be sure to check out resources linked in the Docs tab at the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And there's a new IAM guide and some other good resources there that I think everybody really benefit from. So check it out. All right. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks, Swara. And I hope everyone has a good day or good evening wherever you're at.
Thank you.